But today I'm in Visual Studio and I wanted to take people through a project that's not um, available online or anything yet. And it's really the purpose of this video is to ask people, do they want to see this project become open source or not? Howdy, retro friends and fans of Lost Astronauts and game developers and enthusiasts of software, graphics programmers. Today is, first of all, it's been a long time since I made a video, but I have a new audio situation, so I'm hoping that that is better than it was before. I'm actually gonna make a little bit of an adjustment here so that both microphones. Somebody had told me that I was coming in mono and only in one side, and I was trying to stereoize a mono, but anyway, I apologize for previous videos that had an audio issue. This should be improved. But today I'm in Visual Studio and I wanted to take people through a project that's not available online or anything yet. And it's really the purpose of this video is to ask people, do they want to see this project become open source or not? So I need people to, have. I don't want to release something open source if nobody is going to care or use it or be engaged by it. And at the same time, I've spent a lot of years on it. It actually is valuable, but I don't think people don't know this from that if they go around and try to build something or look for a game engine that's not Unity or Unreal. So I'm just going to go through this and show you guys what I'm talking about, establish what the project's aims are, and see if people are willing to, basically direct message me on Twitter. If, say, 100 people or 50 people or even 10 people are interested in the project, that would be helpful. And that might, I think 10 is a little small of a number. The other thing that I'm looking for out there is if you review game engines, if you're a game programmer, if you're a graphics programmer, if you program for Windows, if you're interested in exploring opportunities with this thing that I'm about to show you, I also want you to get back to me. DM me at LA Game Studio on Twitter. That being said, let's take a look at what I'm talking about here. So if you're familiar with game engines and you write C++, this is for you. About 12, maybe even more, well, it's probably at least 12 years ago, I started writing a game engine in C. And it was really 2006, June, so about 13 years ago. And I wanted to create like a really great game engine that was really... Well, initially I didn't want to create a game engine. I wanted to write a game. And I thought I could quickly write a game using Augur, libaugur, which is a UI toolkit that was used to make Blender in the very beginning. And I had been working with that, and I wanted to use that to build a game. But it quickly became apparent that libaugur was not the way to go for me. I did use it in the workplace for a image analysis tool for the University of Pittsburgh, but once I had finished that project, I didn't really want to continue using libaugur. So by that time it was like 08 or 09, and I was teaching myself C++, and I was using this tool called Isir, which is the Isir or Ekeri. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but for me, I've always called it Isir, but it's maybe Ekeri. It's a Latin term that means writing or something. The this SDK is available online, ecere.org, I believe. But it's an SDK that builds DirectX, Windows, Mac, I think, and Linux at the same time. So I was like, oh, this is great. Like, cross-platform. It's not C++. It's not C. Really nice, lightweight language that allows you to prototype quickly. I was doing stuff in that. And then I realized that I didn't have enough support behind the project to really continue. And so, in frustration and in a desire to really master Windows graphics programming, I began porting it to and ultimately worked in WinAPI. So before you on the screen, you can see that we're inside of Visual Studio. And we're actually looking at an application that I'm developing with this engine called ATE, which is for sale on Steam. Now my goal here is not to release ATE as a open source project. That's really it's a $5 utility that you can buy on Steam that allows you to work with tiles and tile sets and tile atlases and texture atlases. You can use it for a bunch of different things. And I've covered that in other videos, but I want to talk about the technology behind it a little bit and how I was able to pretty much rapidly develop 8 along with several other applications using this framework, and kind of give you a high-level overview of what's in the framework and how the framework helps you and works for you. So that's the plan. So the actual project is not called 8. It's had a couple of different names. I think if I released it as open source, I would either ask the people who might be interested in this to tell me, and I apologize for the background noise, I live near an intersection, to tell people, or to have people tell me what they want it to be called. It's lived under a couple of names. One is the OpenGL Art and Animation Library, which was the first name that I gave it. But the acronym there is OGLAL, which is, you know, what it is. Then I call it the Open Game Framework, OGF. Then I call it the Open Game Engine, OGE. But I never released these projects, so it's never been formally named. And I think calling it Lost Astronauts Game Creation Framework is fine. But even in starting to port that, I have a new version in Qt that I don't want to release open source because it's entirely different, and it's got to incubate for a while, and I want to release some games with it. But you know, this is the engine that I use to release Apolloon. It's the engine that I use to make Fringes, and it's the engine that I use to make ATE. And it is very much a Windows OpenGL engine. It is not even 30 or 64-bit. It's a Win32 engine. So I don't know if that matters to you. You can still use it and build applications with it for 32-bit. And it'll run on machines that go back as far as, say, 2006. It is a lot of work, and it's been a lot of work, and I don't want to see it go away. As I'm porting it, or some of the ideas into, not porting, but I'm sort of cannibalizing it to build something in Qt for myself, I begin to realize that I don't have to do a lot of the things that I did for this engine. So the new version that's in Qt is going to be much simpler and different. But this one is really ground up. So I started with an empty, I started with an OpenGL, a common OpenGL Win32 demo that was given away online. All it did was draw a triangle, and from there I integrated everything else. Some of the stuff was originally built in Ecere or Xeri or Akeri, whatever it is, that EC SDK. I built it in that, and so I ported it to WinAPI, and in the process I had to maintain it for like 10 years. So it supports WinTouch, it supports gamepad controllers, it supports the Steam API, it supports about 80 other libraries that are integrated, and you know, you can put whatever you want into it from that era. It's written around Open AL audio library, and it's also written over libellr, which is part of the OpenAL stuff. It implements a lot of things on top of these things. It also has its own custom GL, which admittedly is a mix between it's 3.1 compatibility context, but some of it is doing 4.0 stuff and some of it is doing 2.0 stuff. So everything that was picked about this was picked because it allows you to have the widest array of options, the widest freedom, and the most features and libraries. So because it's in 32-bit, it uses older 32-bit libraries that, frankly, some have not been ported to the new world of 64. It runs on a very wide array of machines, including ones that are modern, like the one I'm running it on today. And it supports a variety of different interface options, including Logitech Kit, which supports that older style Logitech device. It supports direct input. It supports... I was trying to marry together as many possible things as I could. So when I wrote the interface layer, I was incorporating WinTouch, the older style WinXP Win Gesture, the older style Windows Touch platform from the days before XP. It supports Logitech devices that have LEDs on them that they don't even manufacture anymore, admittedly. It supports MIDI. It supports, although I don't think the MIDI stuff is fully integrated, but there's lots of libraries that handle MIDI. It supports TrueType fonts. It supports it has custom converters that will, if you program it a certain way, will import and export true types and extrude them. It has its own font format. It has its own vertex format. It supports bitmap fonts. It supports just a long list. If you can look here on the left, you can see that there's like a ton of different things. And then as I was going through it, I would have to write tests, and I would write the tests and leave them in the source code. So there's lots of kind of example code that's built in there, and some of these are not things to play with, but some of them are, that allow you to do anything from particle systems to all sorts of weird graphic stuff like splitting a grid, or lithophanes, which is like it'll generate a lithophane from an image, so it takes the height map and it creates a printable 3D object, and then you can export that. It's got a circle placer, a lot of things to randomly or procedurally develop levels. So the first game that I wrote with this was Empire in the Sky, an unreleased title that was on Desura and IndieDB. It's actually released in some demo form, but it was never fully released. And that was a 2.5D sort of No Man's Sky type game that came out way before No Man's Sky was available, back in like the Minecraft days when that was just getting big. It also implements like more than 100 shaders from a variety of different sources or ones that I created myself. It has, your vertex class, your 3D model class, your matrix class. You can support older GLSL versions. You can support modern pipelines. You can support materials in the formal way that you used to be able to support them back in 2004. That concept of a material. It's got this concept of matter and chemistry. So you have matter, which is one or more 3D objects, but it also just has a standard model. The model has support for being imported as an STL or as an OBJ or as a PLY rather, a ply file, standard ply, and it supports loading of PNG and JPEG into a OpenGL texture. You can do image manipulation prior to it being uploaded. You can store it on the CPU side if you want to do your own custom manipulations of the image. It can save those images as pings. it can simply take that memory that's been modified and send it to the GPU. So if you wanted to do that, that was actually written um, during a consultation with the guys who wrote Spaz. Um, it's got some of Hummus, if anybody's familiar with Hummus, and Emil Pearson. He gave me a ton of just code that I could use, and it's integrated and it's part of the engine, and it's all available for commercially viable use. Although I don't technically use a lot of his stuff, but you can look at his infinite procedural terrain demo in there that's integrated. You've got all sorts of things that I had to think up while developing 2D games. Like, I don't know, I wanted to do a really good sphere, so I have a lot of cube map sphere generation stuff. You just give it a cube texture, or you actually just give it 6 for doing skyboxes, right? Or for doing spheres. So you give it 6 textures, and it will cube map that to a sphere, which is slightly higher quality. And you can choose the resolution and have it generate those for you. You can make them on the fly. There's a sphere painter that comes from Empire in the Sky that allows you to do layered stuff. Some of this stuff is pretty, intense. It has a lot of, Empire in the Sky took a long, 10 minutes to load up. So some of this stuff is if you have a lot of them, it will still do it, but it's just a lot of, some of them are more complicated algorithms that aren't fully available for a real-time game. Others are more real-time. We have some threading operations in here where you can create a loading screen. You've got, so you can have a progress bar while it loads. You've got, and you can do other things with threads, obviously. You've got your model. You've got ways to generate parametrically a wide variety of objects, including cubes, spheres, toroids, different types of pyramids, different types of figures. You've got a shape handler, a polygon manipulation stuff called mPolygon. Now, this thing is not written as a library, and it would never be able to be written as a library. So what you do is you would download this encyclopedia of source code, and you would go in and you would start writing from the load procedure. So if you go in here to the Solution Explorer and you type in load, it's going to come up with a bunch of stuff. But one of them says application game, all right? And somewhere in here, there's load.h. And in load.h, you've got load. And this is called during the app init, because there's a formal app class that handles all of the app level stuff, like the game loop and stuff like that. And then you create an instantiation of that, and or you can create a child of that to change the defaults or add to it. But anyway, you go into load, and then you would be able to change the things that are loaded, like the primitives or whatever you needed. It's all just empty functions, or if whatever you want to do here. But this is the file that sets up everything that happens in the main prior to the initial window, and then at the very end it loads the windows, and those windows are written as classes of subclasses of a class called GL window, and that allows you to create a window on the screen. And for instance, we have the game for ATE. The only window that I load is the game workspace loading window, which is an iterative. When you load up 8, you see this iterative loading screen that's loading textures and loading all of your data into it, and that's what the first window is. And from that window, all other windows are created. So it's pretty simple. And there's a couple of other ones in here, and I'm sure I won't be giving you 8, but inside of here there are like smoke tests. You can run any of the tests in the load windows function at the end of load.cpp. So you can just load the smoke test, or you can load the FBO test. Some of them may not work, but most of them work. I mean, some of them have to have other things loaded, and it's arbitrary, but most of them will just load up in there. And usually you can click or hit a key you should probably read the code, for that particular window. So let's just quickly look at that. So for smoke test, I'll turn off, or it's actually not going to load the game. So if I go to definition on the smoke test, you see it's using a smoke 2D class that has been written, and it creates these different versions of it. And then it actually has some pre-computed smoke. And these are all just particle systems, different ways to handle them. You can do them in real time, you can do them pre-computed, you can do them on the GPU. But these happen to be CPU side, pre-computed ones. And, it calls one of them when the window loads. It creates a window. Here, I'll just go through it with you. On load, the background is clear or transparent. It has an anchor of 0000, which means all edges of the screen. So it's kind of like stretching a canvas. You're stretching it from the corners. And then vapor is run, which probably sets up probably pre-computes this vapor. And then it calls vapor between during the between. So there's always render in between, kind of like React and kind of like a lot of other engines. You're calling render in between. Render is the thing that is called during the GPU cycle or part of the main loop, whereas between is being called right before that. So you're calling vapor between. You hit left down, it'll, for one of the tests it has something, but it looks like for vapor it doesn't even have that. And if I want, I'm just going to hit play here and it's going to build it. Now it might take a little bit, but this is probably built already. It does take a little while to build it the first time, but then I'm going to hit play, and I'm hoping that it'll appear inside the Camtasia window, but I'm not really sure if it will or not. But let's see if it comes up. Aside from the capture software, it will work. And it's got a couple of other routines in here that are written just to try out different things, because that's generally how you write. You write your test case. Okay, what's vapor going to look like on the screen? It's 2D. What's this going to look like? I'm going to write my vapor parameters for the particle systems, and then I'm going to test it out on the screen. Maybe it's where I click. Maybe it's just going. And then once I've got that, I can then close down the application, integrate it into my main game code, which is in the same, same code base, if you will. So, there's ideas from JavaScript in this. There's ideas from processing in this. There's ideas from a variety of different places, and there's so many things going on in it. It would take forever, and I do want to do kind of like a demo series or a tutorial series. I'm kind of hoping other people might be interested in doing a tutorial series on it as well. Not sure what I'm looking at here. You can see that something is going on in this. Maybe you can't. Oh, there we go. All right, so it's loading up, and it did a bunch of pre-computation and setting up of lookup tables and stuff like that. There, we loaded it. Now, I apologize for the way this is looking. Let me just... Okay, there we go. So I'm hoping it's capturing this, but basically you can see that we have a particle system that produces vapor. It looks like the particles are producing a fairly realistic looking smoke. That's done with a single smoke texture. This is one approach. The orange background is, instead of the blue screen of death, we have the orange screen of death. So if you don't have any windows that fill the background, you'll see an orange window in the very, very background. And obviously you're going to put a window in front of it that has a black or white or is drawing over that background. But in this case, it's just a test case, so I'm isolating it and I don't have any background to the window. So that, it appears greenish orange because there's no background to the window, but I'll just demonstrate, and hopefully I captured that. But I'll just demonstrate quickly, I can change the color of the window background with one small change. So if I go in here, remember I said it set the background to clear. We're going to set the background to black. Okay. Now there's a couple of things that I should mention someday about, like for instance, there's no white, even though there's a black, there is a clear, but there's no white because of namespace collision. So instead it's called alabaster. You get used to typing that kind of stuff. It's fine. it has a lot of pre-programmed colors. It has this crayon class that's really great. It handles waveforms and tweens, easing, that kind of thing. It's really got a lot going on. You can make an entire game with it, and at some level, some of it is very much done, and other parts of it, are left open ended so that you can build on top of them. There's a GL window class. There's a couple of UI systems that are built in. There's a bunch of sample artwork that would have to be sent out with it. And it's just a lot of stuff, and I don't want to see it go to waste. I want to give it away. I want people to be able to capitalize on it, and I want credit. And so the caveat is just, you can make money with it. Please put our name and contact information in your credits, in your manual, and that's it. And support the project in some way would be great. Like, maybe I'll set up donations for it or something. But it would be nice to see it live beyond just my personal use. So here we're loading up again, and in debug mode things are a little bit slower, but you're only seeing part of the screen because that's just the way Camtasia works. It's actually a full screen thing that's going on, but hopefully it's capturing it. You can see here with the black background and the mouse cursor, and we have full keyboard support. You can know the difference between left and right shift. You can know the difference between left and right control. There's nothing that hasn't been combed over from that era captured in this source code, and it still works great. So I would love to see other people make stuff with this, maybe support it in some way. I would love it to take off. So I'm asking the community, how can I make this take off? What can I do for you guys? I want to release the source code. Convince me to do so, because there's a plan. Or can you participate? Will you participate? I'm willing to set up Google Hangout meetings with you when time is available for both of us, to talk about this. If you're a blogger or just an enthusiastic developer who wants to work on something like this, or just wants to use it, or even maybe have a preview of it, talk about it online. I don't know if I'm going to give the source code away just yet, but I would be willing to, demo it for people, let people play with it remotely. In the beginning, I don't know. We need to talk about it. Convince me that this is worth doing, because right now I'm convinced that I would do that. I would stick it on GitHub, and 3 things would happen. 1, nobody would see it or care about it. 2, if they did care about it, they would just cannibalize it. And 3, I wouldn't get anything out of it. I wouldn't get really any notoriety or even credit for it. So I just want to be careful about just giving it away, but I'm not against the idea at this stage, because I'm building a new engine off the best parts of this now. And I'm not saying that this isn't bad, but it's living in a certain technical paradigm, and it has certain nuances to it, and grains of sand are in it, and it's great, and I love working with it, but it certainly keeps me away from the Mac market and other things. But yet it's an awesome engine, and it's really a great PC game engine, and maybe the last great PC game engine that's been written from scratch. There's lots of great PC games out there, but this is an engine for engine users. It's also an engine for scientists. Because I'm a scientist, and I used it for science. It's an engine for 3D developers who are going to build 3D tools for 3D printing or anything else, CNC, whatever. It's for application developers. It's for utility developers. And as long as you're willing to still release things in Win32, and maybe there's a way that some other genius out there will show me how to or work on it on the GitHub, but I just want to be real careful about releasing it, because I've released things in the past and like 2 people see them. How do we make this a really great thing? It's got so much work in it. Just an amazing thing. You have no idea. Once you get into it, you realize exactly, like, it's so powerful. I don't know how to, nothing is like it. Maybe 3JS is kind of like parts of it, and this and that, but it's just got it all it's just the best thing. I don't know, I love it. I've been working on it forever, and I just kind of accept that it's time for things to change with it, and I hope people will find it useful, because it's really like, if I needed to write an automated, image tool, I would go to this, because I could rapidly do that. I could do that within days, and it would be fully releasable window tool. Windows for Windows. And also, I should mention that Lost Astronaut has a lifetime of support from Microsoft. I don't know what that means, but they did give me premium support. I'm in a database somewhere. This tool has influenced the development of Visual Studio in the past, behind the scenes. They look at my code. They've fixed bugs. They've apologized to me in the past. There's just lots of things that have happened with Microsoft, and I'm hoping that at some level we can get this to be more than just my collection of 1,800 classes. Just briefly, I'll finish the video by kind of showing off the files, I guess. Now, keeping in mind that some of this is the application, but I think by and large, the source code is, yes, there are application-specific parts of the source code, but it's definitely... So if I go into my source code here, I mean, this is just the A's, the B's, the C's, the D's. I mean, there's just so many files. There's 1,300 files, and there's like almost 2,000 classes. It's over 400,000 lines of code. I mean, there's got to be some value to this to other people. I've got snow, lightning. You can write your own. I've got several different particle system approaches. I've got a massively sized 2D world that you can populate with data and procedurally generate, or just have a huge world, a massive world. We're talking like huge. Like, it would take you hours to go from A to B on it. You've also got smaller ones that wrap around. You've got... I encountered so many... Whenever I would see a feature of a game over the years, I would be like, oh, I'm going to do that, but I'm going to do that to the nth degree. And so, there's the classic problem in OpenGL where you can't display a trapezoid. So I created isotrap grid so that you can display trapezoids. I mean, it's just, everything is in here. Interpolated point film. That's where you can... some of these things are like, I have the beginning to it, but most of it is done. And so an interpolated point film is basically, you take a bunch of points in one position and you put them in another position, and maybe you change the color, and it'll morph on the screen by being interpolated. You can use that for whatever you want, but it's just different ways to approach graphics and showing off little animations. You've got the infinite terrain demo from Hummus. You've got several cameras. It uses GLM, which is the camera system that is the most advanced camera system in here. You've got ways to do collages of images. You've got ways to convert an image into a model, meaning you put different colored vertexes on single pixels in an image, and it will convert that into its relative positions in a 0 to 1 normalized space, so that you can have kind of not so random placements in a level. You've got incremental Halton, which is a bit of Sony code, or maybe it's from The Sims or something, I forget, but that one was open source and you could use that. You've got a forever wrapping quad, where you can just display a moving quad. You've got parallax mapping of n layers. You've got different approaches to building UIs. So you've got the processor method, which uses kind of like a React.js or a processing. You write like a little processing thing that does a button, and then you can hook. You can make a child of that has a custom, you know, functionality, and then you can hook that onto a processors list, and then in your window you create your processors list, you add that to your processors list, and you put that into and then you have that update and render in the update and render, and you'll see that it has a presentation class that has slides, lets you do like a PowerPoint or a movie. I made several entire like animations just by coding, and having source graphics. You know, there's different ways to draw lines, different ways to like handle circles and collision detection. Like for instance, my collision detection is pretty advanced. You can draw a line through a circle and then detect where it comes out. You can detect the segment that is the collision segment. Box in box tests, circle box tests, a lot of different things there. Like an AI DJ, you can play music and long form stuff. Streaming, you have two streams and you can crossfade them. It is theoretically, I did write the routines for doing recording on a microphone, so you can make musical software with it. I mean, it just really could be anything. And I think it would be really neat to see a bunch of things come out of me releasing it. I just want people to kind of, you know, if this interests you in any way, please get back to me. Talk to me on Twitter. You know, get in touch with me. I may not get back to you right away, but like, you know, it's a bit of a commitment to do this, and I want people to, you know, if they are interested, you know, convince me to do this. Like, if I can find a community for this, which I so wanted to have, then I'd be more serious about kind of trimming it down, putting it out there, and then, you know, maybe creating some initiatives. I want to see somebody else want to work with it, and I love it. And I licensed it to several companies, but it's just not going anywhere in that world. I mean, it is what it is. You got A-star algorithm, you got roguelike level generators that can be built off of to build your own roguelikes. It's just so many things. I can't even go into them all. Well, thanks for listening. I appreciate it. This was a longer video than I intended, but there's a lot here, and I want people to DM me on Twitter at LA Game Studio. I look forward to hearing from you if you're interested in this.